Jesus, we are honored to be in your presence today. We are honored and we are privileged to be in your presence today. To hear from you, to worship you. God, I ask that you would open our hearts to hear from you. Open our ears to hear your voice. I ask that you would speak to each of us right where we are in our individual situations, life situations. I ask again, Lord, that you would translate what is said this morning to each of us individually. The message that you need each of us to hear, to cultivate our hearts and our minds, and to be refined into your image, so that we may reflect you everywhere we go throughout the week. God, you are so amazing. No matter how crazy sometimes things get, you are so amazing. You're always faithful. Always faithful. We humble ourselves before you and ask that you would speak to each of us. Thank you, Lord. So, can you turn me down just a hair? It kind of sounds a little boomy. God is so good. We've seen his faithfulness even through this storm of this last week. So faithful. Brought each of us through that. Well, it may have lost power, but we did not lose our God. And I got the chance to drive around a little bit in the community, going to check on a couple places, going into town, and visiting with people. And I got to see a little bit quieter side of the area. And as a matter of fact, there's a little stretch of road right up here, just right off of Worth Road. You've probably driven by it before. I mean, it's nothing flashy. It's just fields, tree lines, gentle rise and fall of the land that's been worked and farmed with wheat and beans and corn and cattle and sheep for generations. And running along one part of that road that I was driving down, there's a fence. You know the kind that we have around here. It's nothing new. It's not pretty. It's been there a really long time. Probably grandpa or great-grandpa put it in. And on one side, the posts are painted white. On the other side, it's just bare cedar. Gray, weathered, holding their ground, but definitely starting to show their age now. And a wire runs along it, straight as a plumb line, like it's been measuring something or doing something more than just guarding the land. There are 2 farms. There are 2 families. 2 histories. And somewhere along the way, that fence stopped being just a boundary and started becoming a statement. See, everyone around here understands how all that works. You keep your cattle on your side of the fence. You don't let your equipment drift over that line. After all, what are fences for? If a branch falls from their tree onto your side of the fence, you don't burn it. You don't keep it. You stack it right back where it came from. Not because you hate them, not because you're mad at them. It's just because that's the line, right? And truth be told, that line kind of keeps the peace. Because as long as everyone stays on their own side of the line, there are no arguments. There's no confusion, no conflict. Everyone knows where that line is. Everyone gets what's theirs. Nobody takes more than they should. Everything is measured. Everything is fair. And if you grew up in a rural place like Lachine or Heron or Alpena or Hillman or Hubbard Lake, it all makes sense because that's just how life is around here. But then one morning you wake up and something's just off. You step outside, coffee's still warm in your mug in your hand, and you look out over toward your neighbor's property. Looks like the fence is gone, not down, not sagging, not leaning, but I mean gone. Post pulled right up out of the ground. Wire rolled up, tossed in the ditch over there. Probably 100 yards or more of the fence just gone. I mean, you don't even need to ask because you know who did it, right? And you know why they did it. So as you go over and you walk that line, your eyes shoot fire and your jaws tighten with every step because you know who and you know why. And you also know something else. You know what you're owed. You know what the law says about things like this. You know what's fair. And you don't even have to think about it. You already know what comes next. So, you rebuild the fence. Not sloppy this time. Oh no. Oh no. Stronger posts. Heavier and tighter wire. Measured twice. And maybe, just maybe, you set the post just a few inches more toward their side. I mean, not enough to start a war over it, but enough to prove a point. Because they crossed the line first, not you. You protect what yours. You make it right. And you're going to even the score. And if anyone in town ever heard about it, they wouldn't question you at all. They'd understand. They'd just nod. Yep, that sounds fair, they'd say. You just know that's what they'd say. Because out here, fairness keeps the peace. Fairness keeps things from getting out of hand. Fairness draws lines, so no one has to wonder where they stand. Everybody knows. But standing there, boots in the dirt, wind whispering through the trees, Posts and wire laying everywhere at your feet and rolled up over there in the ditch. There's something else sitting just below the surface, too. Not just justice. Something a little hotter and a little sharper. See, you don't just want it fixed. You want your neighbor to feel it. You want them to know what it costs you. You want them to think twice before they do it again. And it's right there. In that moment, that you know that your response and your plans are justified. It's reasonable. I'd even say it's even righteous. And it's right then, as your eyes are burning with anger, that Jesus starts to speak. He says, "You've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." In other words, you know the system, you know the rules, you know how this works. And then he says, "But I say to you." And suddenly, this isn't just about offense anymore. So standing there, I mean, you don't feel evil about it. You don't feel out of control. You don't feel like you're doing anything wrong. You feel right in your feelings. And not just right, but justified. Because there's a system you've been living with your whole life. A way of keeping things balanced. A way of making sure that nobody gets taken advantage of. It's fair. It's a way of making sure that wrongs are righted and the right is restored. But Jesus directly calls it out. He says in Matthew 5:38, "You have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." Now, when we hear that nowadays, it sounds harsh. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Knock out a guy's tooth, then you get yours knocked out. But in its time, when this law was being used, it was actually mercy. Because before this law, the restoration didn't stop. Retaliation kept going and going. It never ended. If someone injured you, you didn't just get even, you got ahead. You take my eye, I take your life. You take from my family, I wipe yours out. Just ask the Hatfields and McCoys. Conflict spiraled, and everything just kept escalating. So God stops in and says, "Time out!" No more escalation, no more spiraling, no more taking more than what was taken from you. So see, it was mercy. If a wrong is done, the response must match it. Nothing more. No more going beyond it. Justice becomes measured. It was never permission for revenge. This law wasn't meant to say you must pluck out someone's eye if they damage yours. It was just putting limits to it. But what was meant to limit retaliation was, of course, taken by humans, and it became justification for it. People stopped hearing this far and no further and started hearing, I have the right to do this. A lot like human. And now, that ancient math, the ancient system, is the quiet math running in the background of every conflict today. You hurt me, I hurt you. You take, I take. You cross the line, I push back. And if we're being honest here, we don't just believe that. We rely on that. It's how we decide what we're going to say back. How cold do we act toward them? How long do we get to hold on to that grudge? How much distance will we create between us and the offender? It's how we justify our tone, the silent treatment, the subtle payback, the little jabs behind their back. It doesn't even feel wrong anymore. After all, you're following the law, right? It feels fair. It feels responsible. It feels like we're doing exactly what we're supposed to do to keep things from getting out of hand. They can't get away with it. But see, here's the problem. That system might keep things from endlessly escalating on the outside, but something very different is happening on the inside. And you know that's true because you experience it. Because every time you replay that in your mind, it goes over and over. Every time you justify what you're doing or not doing, every time you tighten that wire just a little bit more, something starts to build below the surface. It's pressure. Like the rivers and streams around here in the dead of winter when everything looks quiet on the surface. It's frozen, not moving. It's safe. There's probably a good 18 inches of ice on there, right? But beneath all that ice and snow, the current hasn't stopped moving. It's pushing, it's pressing. It's looking for somewhere to go. And when the thaw finally comes, it doesn't just trickle. It bursts like a dam that is just broken. Ice piles up, pressure releases, water surges. Happened to our neighbor just a couple weeks ago. And what looked controlled moments ago suddenly floods everything downstream. And it doesn't just affect the person on the other side of the fence. It spills into your home, into your thoughts, your relationships, your spirit, your prayer life. See, Jesus isn't just confronting what you do at the fence line. He's exposing the entire system under that fence line. The system that says what I think is fair is right. And this is where the tension continues to grow because most of us have built our lives on that very assumption. What if, however, right is not the same thing as righteous? What if the system you've been trusting in is the very thing keeping you from looking like your Father? See, Jesus doesn't just stick to theory here or to the realm of ideas. He walks it straight right into the situation. In Matthew 5:39, he says, "But I say to you, do not resist an evil person." And right there, you can feel the tension just rise. Because that sounds like it's wrong. Don't resist an evil person? It sounds like weakness. Like passivity. Like letting people walk all over you, and I'm not going to let that happen. But see, that's not what Jesus is saying here at all. He's not telling you to shrink back. He's not telling you to become less. He isn't nerfing strength. He's redefining it. The second part of that verse, Matthew 5:39, is, if someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. Now, for us, that sounds like violence. We're slapping people now. Really? But in that culture, then, a slap on the right cheek wasn't about the injury. It was about the insult of being slapped on the right cheek. It's just a backhand. It was a way of saying, you are less than me. So if you backhand somebody on the right cheek, that's what you were saying in that culture. You're less than me. It was about dignity, honor, status. And everything inside you, when that happens, wants to respond. And it wants to respond firmly, so that there is no question. Not later, not after you've sat there for a while and processed it, but right now. So you feel that surge of anger rising up in you. Hot, it's immediate, it's unfiltered, it's right there, just below the surface. Like driving down a back road in the middle of a whiteout. We do that from time to time here in northern Michigan. The wind's cutting sideways. Snow's blasting across the windshield. And you're thanking Jesus for those rumble strips that tells you you're still on the road. Thank you. You don't just sit there in the middle of the road and calmly think things through. You react right away. Muscles tighten up. The hands grip the steering wheel like your life depends on it. Sometimes it does. You correct hard. You hit the gas. You hit the brakes. You oversteer. You overcompensate. Because in that moment, the adrenaline starts to take over, and suddenly you're panicking. And that's exactly what Jesus is talking about here. That split-second reflex, that moment when something hits you and everything inside you wants to hit right back, only harder. Not just physically, but words, with tone, with silence, with distance, with chill, with a post on social media, with a look that could kill. You know, because you've been there. I have too. So I understand it. But see, Jesus asks a question here behind the command. What if you didn't live controlled by that impulse anymore? What would life be like? Matthew 5:40 and 41 says, if you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Now it's starting to get even closer to home. Because this isn't just an insult anymore. It's about inconvenience. It's about pressure. It's about allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. And everything inside of us just stands up and says, you have to draw the line somewhere. Right? Protect yourself. Hold your ground. Don't let them take advantage of you. And make sure that this never happens again. We begin to rebuild that fence, don't we? But see, Jesus isn't addressing what you do. He's exposing what controls what you do. Because if someone else can determine your reaction, then that someone else has power over you. If they can pull you into anger, if they can force you into retaliation, if they can drag you into keeping score, then you're not a free person. You're being controlled. You're reacting like a puppet on a string. You're still living inside that same old system, but you're just on the other side of the fence is all. So hear me. Jesus isn't asking you to be weak. He's calling you to be unhooked, unmoved, to be free in a way that the moment doesn't get to tell you who you have to become. To stand in a place where you're not owned by offense or driven by reaction to a situation. You don't have to swing back, not because it wouldn't be fair, but because you no longer live by that system. And this is where things start to shift. Because if you don't respond the way the world expects you to, then what are you supposed to do? Well, at this point, you can feel it. The crowd on that mountainside isn't just uncomfortable. They're getting to be downright unsettled. Because Jesus hasn't just challenged their behavior. He's starting to unravel the system itself. That quiet math running under everything. That spreadsheet of the debits and credits. Matthew 5:42. Jesus says, "Give to those who ask, and don't turn away from those who want to borrow." And now, this isn't just about insults or retaliation or what happens right then and there. Now it's about how you see people. Because for most of us, whether we realize it or not, we too live on a ledger. We may not write it down or put it in an Excel spreadsheet, but we keep track. We know who owes what, who did what, who deserves what. And it shows up everywhere in everything we do. You give, but only so much. You help, but there are limits to it. You forgive, but with conditions. You move on, but you never release them. Uh-oh. Because somewhere in the background, there's always a calculation running in your head. Is this fair? Is it really worth it? Have they earned it? And if the answer is no, we tighten up. We pull back. We give the silent treatment. We rebuild the fence. But Jesus walks straight into that system and he removes the calculator. He doesn't say balance it better. He says stop living like that entirely, because the kingdom doesn't run on transactions. It runs on grace. And grace doesn't consider what somebody deserves. Thank you, Jesus. Grace asks, what would better reflect the Father? And that question changes everything. Because we're supposed to reflect the Father. Because now it's not about protecting your side of the fence anymore. It's about what's happening on the inside of you. Something that loosens your grip on what you think you're owed. I've actually had God come to me when I was wronged. Got cheated out of a whole lot of money. And he came to me and said, Chris, I'll always take care of you, but you have got to let that debt be owed to me, and you're going to have to be good with that. Let me tell you, that wasn't an easy pill to swallow, but it was worth it. But let's be honest for a second. Most of us don't keep score because we're petty. At least we don't see ourselves as petty. We keep score because something mattered. Because something was taken or broken and wasn't made right. And the ledger feels like the only way that we can hold on to justice, to hold people accountable. Like, if we let go, we're saying that it didn't matter. Like, we're pretending that it didn't even hurt. But it did. But see, holding on to it comes at a cost. Because every time you revisit it, every time you replay that over and over in your head, every time you run the numbers again, the pressure keeps building. Like ice stacking on a river in late winter. Layer on top of layer on top of layer. Pushing, shifting, holding, until one day something breaks and the water rushes. And when it does, it doesn't just affect the person upstream. It floods everything downstream. Your relationships, your peace. Suddenly your joy is gone. Your ability to trust. Your ability to love again without guarding every inch. And most of the time, the person who hurt you isn't even in the picture anymore. But the pressure still is. See, Jesus isn't asking you to stop keeping score. He's inviting you into a life where you don't even need the scoreboard at all. A life where your peace is no longer tied to someone else settling the account. Because there is no account. But see, that raises the question, the one that was making everybody so uncomfortable on that hillside, and the one that we still feel today. See, if I'm not keeping score, how do I live with people who hurt me? See, this is where it stops being theoretical. Because up to this point, you can still keep things kind of general. Yeah, I shouldn't overreact. Yeah, I shouldn't keep score. But now Jesus brings it even closer to home. As a matter of fact, he's kind of sitting right in our living room on this one. Matthew 5:43, Jesus says, "You have heard that the law says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. And that right there. Everyone on that hillside understood what he was talking about there, because that wasn't written in the law like that. That's not how the law was actually stated. But it was how people lived. Love your people. Be good to your circle. Take care of your own. And the rest, keep your distance from them. Draw your lines. Protect what is yours. In other words, build that fence. And if we're honest, that still makes sense to us today. Now, we don't actually say hate your enemies out loud. We just avoid them, ignore them, write them off, give them the silent treatment, the cold shoulder. I mean, we keep things polite, but distant. We don't tear the fence down. We actually make sure it stays strong, and we reinforce it because it's justified, and we make sure that that fence is explained. Because we're right. But see, Jesus doesn't leave room for that. The next verse, verse 44, he says, "But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you." And just like that, the whole system collapses. Because now this isn't just about fairness anymore. Now, that fence has a name and a face. The person who crossed that line, it's the one who took something from you, the one who twisted your words, the one who hurt you, and the one who walked away like it didn't even matter to them. And even worse, they never came back to fix it. You don't have to imagine it, because you know exactly who I'm talking about. And Jesus says, love them. Not tolerate them, not manage them, not avoid them. Love them. And not from a distance either. He says, pray for them. How many here have prayed for people that you were really angry with? I've done that. Sometimes that was really one of the things that got me through it. And my prayers were not, and our prayers in these situations should not be, and God, get even. Get my stuff back. Make them understand how they wronged me. No. We're supposed to actually pray for them, that God would bless them and cover them with grace and with mercy. And I can tell you from personal experience that isn't always easy, but it is always needed. So we bring them before God. We say their name in a place where bitterness can no longer breathe. You place them in the hands of the Father who sees far more clearly than you do, who keeps better track than you do, and covers you with grace anyhow. Not because they deserve it, but because that's what your Heavenly Father does. And see, this is where something inside us starts to push back, sometimes pretty hard. Because we hear this and it feels like you're letting them off the hook. You're letting justice be ignored. Like what happened didn't matter. But that isn't what Jesus is saying here at all. He isn't saying that it didn't matter. He's saying you don't have to be the one who carries it anymore. Put it in the Father's hands. You don't have to carry the weight of making it right. You don't have to keep track. You don't have to keep replaying it over and over in your mind, recalculating it, reopening it, re-scratching off the wounds. Because as long as you hold on to it, you stay tied to it. You stay tied to that moment, tied to that offense, tied to that person. And what feels like control to you is actually captivity in disguise. See, Jesus isn't asking you to pretend it never happened. He's inviting you to let yourself live free from it. Free from the need to get even. Free from the need to make them feel it. Free from the system that says, you owe me. And when that grip starts to drop, something in you changes. Because now, you're not standing there at the fence line anymore. Measuring it, guarding it, shooting darts out of your eyes, calculating the cost of what they owe you. You're stepping into something entirely different, something that doesn't just change how you respond. It reveals whose you are. So, everything Jesus has said up to this point, all of it, leads to right here. Because this isn't just about behavior. It's about resemblance. Matthew 5:45 starts out, in that way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. In other words, there's a way of living that makes it absolutely unmistakable who you belong to. Not by what you say, not by what you post on Facebook or Insta or TikTok, not by what you claim, but by what comes out of you when you're wronged. Because Jesus says, the last part of that verse, for he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. Think about it. The same sun that shines on you shines on both sides of that fence. That same rain soaks both fields. God doesn't ration his kindness based on who deserves it that day. He gives because when he gives, it flows out of who he is. And Jesus is saying, when you live this way, you start to look like him. Not when you win the argument, not when you prove your point, not when you get return of what was stolen, not when you rebuild the fence so perfectly, so straight, so just a little bit further on their side. But when something comes out of you that doesn't match what was done to you, that's the signature of your Father. When something comes out of you that doesn't match what was done to you, that's the signature of your Father. It's like his name was written across your life in a way, in the way that you respond to what just happened. because anyone can love people who love them back. That's easy. Jesus says in Matthew 5:46 and 47, if you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you're only kind to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even the pagans do that. In other words, when we love those who love us, that's nothing special. It's not different. That's not kingdom. That's not Jesus' signature across your life. Even the people who are evil live like that. But you are called to something more. Something that can't be explained by personality or upbringing or circumstance or income. Because when you begin to love like that, when you begin to release what you're owed, when you stop keeping score, when you discard the scoreboard, when you stop rebuilding the fence and refuse to be pulled back into that old system, people start to notice. Not because it's loud, but because it's different. It's different than how they live. See, there's a steadiness, a refusal to be shaken, and a freedom that doesn't come and go based on circumstance. But eventually someone is going to ask, how are you able to live like that? What's up? What is different about you? The answer isn't, I'm trying harder to be nice. The answer is, I've been with Jesus and he has changed my life. I'm learning to live from a different place now. Because this kind of life doesn't come from willpower. It comes from becoming more and more like your Father. See, when his heart changes yours, you don't hold on to that stuff anymore. You respond differently. You become someone different. And after everything Jesus has just said, you can almost feel the question rumbling through the crowd. Now, how far is he going to go with this? Like, is there limits to this? Is there a line somewhere? Still looking for that fence line. Because we're comfortable with lines, with fences, with moral lines, with relational lines. Places where we can say, I've done enough. I've gone far enough. I've met the standard. And then Jesus removes the line entirely. He says in verse 48, but you who are perfect. Sorry, I said that wrong. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Now, at first, it sounds impossible, doesn't it? How are we going to be perfect? Because now it sounds like no matter what I do, I'm never going to be enough. It sounds like no matter how I respond, I'm always going to fall short. But the word perfect here doesn't mean flawless. The Greek word is teleos, which means complete, whole, fully formed, mature, like something that has grown into what it was always meant to be. So he's saying, but you are to be complete, whole, fully formed, mature, even as your Father in heaven is complete, whole, fully formed, mature. He isn't saying try harder. He's saying step into the way that I created you to become. Take on my image. Move beyond the line into a different way of living altogether. Because as long as you're walking that fence line, you're always going to be asking, what's required? What's far enough? What's fair? What's enough? But when you begin to live from a place of looking like your Father and living like your Father, those questions start to disappear. Because now it's not about the minimum. Now it's about the resemblance. Now, what could it look like to respond like him in that situation? And this is where everything comes together. The fence line, the pressure beneath the surface, the reflex when you're hit, the people you'd rather not see ever again. All of it points to this. You're being formed into something, not just someone who behaves better, not just a nice person, but someone who reflects the very heart of God. Because when the Father's heart is formed in you, you don't need a line to tell you how to live. Because his heart is beating in your chest. Love becomes your instinct, what you naturally do. It becomes your reflex. It becomes the atmosphere around you. So now the question isn't, where's the line? The question is, who are you becoming? And maybe even more personally, who you're becoming the next time you're wronged. Because that moment, that's where all of this becomes real. That's where this moves from Jesus teaching on a mountain to a decision to let him make you like him. And that's really what it comes down to on that mountainside. Are you willing to let it all go and let him make you look like him, breathe like him, respond like him, walk like him, talk like him, think like him? And that's his challenge to us, to apply that to our life. So, Lord, we repent of trying to rebuild the fence, of walking that line, of holding on to the things that we're taught by the world system is fair. God, forgive us. Help us to be like you. Help us to let those debts be owed to you. And help us to be good with that. Make us into your image. Give us a heart like yours that loves you. And if you're here or you're watching this online or a recording later, this can be for you. But see, Romans 3:23 says that all have sinned. We've all messed up badly. We've all held grudges. We've all been angry. We've all rebuilt the fences. We've all done worse than that. We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And Matthew 6:23 says that because we've sinned, the wages of that sin is death. It means we're all sentenced to death. But see, Jesus didn't wait for us to be sorry. Because before any of us sitting here were ever born or thought of, he died for us. He gave himself as a sacrifice for our freedom. So, how do we move on from here? Well, to accept his gift of salvation to redeem us. Romans chapter 10, verse 9 says that we confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord. If you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, that you will be saved. There isn't a special set of words you have to say, not a poem you need to recite or a special prayer. Just say, Jesus, I believe that you're Lord. And I believe that God raised you from the dead to redeem me. And the Bible says if you do that, we'll be saved. And then we just walk in his ways and we let him refine us and change our hearts. And that's where the journey is. And we'd like to walk that journey with you. So if that's you and you would like us to pray with you, and we certainly have some good next steps that we'd like to share with you. And we'd love to walk this journey with you as you allow God to transform your heart and your mind into his image. So if you just contact us, if you're not in this area, we'll connect you with a good church in your area who can walk this with you, because the Bible says we need to walk this journey together. But I invite you to begin that journey today. So here in a moment, we're going to have some of our prayer team members up front, and we'd love to pray with you about letting go of the past or anything else, healing, whatever you need us to go to the throne room with you about and talk to God about. We'd love to pray with you because we serve a faithful God who loves us even when we screw up. He still loves us. So I invite you to come up, to pray, to ask God for help, because he is faithful. Now you can feel released to go. I do ask if you're going to stay in the sanctuary here that you remain in an attitude of prayer. But if you need to take off, feel released. Blessings on you.